Headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
I was quite surprised, having watched that press conference yesterday, by a really quite angry reaction online to some of her comments when she was talking about how many years does it take and how many foreign secretaries does it take to get me out of Iran? 6 years and 5 foreign secretaries. First of all, do you think that her criticism of the government is fair?
I think if you spend some time with Nazanin, which I spent quite a lot of time with her yesterday, and she privately tells you, and I know she didn't want to announce it at the press conference, what she's gone through and what happened to her in solitary confinement. And she did actually say this publicly, that from the second week she was there, they said to her, the people who were interrogating her, bear in mind, Julia, they were standing outside her cell, calling their children and taunting her so she couldn't see her 2-year-old. I mean, this was not an easy situation for this woman. They told her from the second week, if your government pays the money, you are going home.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, it is a legitimate debt, and all the ministers from government are going on TV at the moment saying it's legitimate debt, which they didn't admit for all these years. I was watching Sajid Javid in disbelief while he was talking about it's legitimate debt. Of course we should pay it. So as soon as we paid the legitimate debt, she would have been home. I mean, I actually think for 6 years, if someone is captured and you know it has nothing to do with you, you haven't actually done any charges of espionage, which is what she was locked up for. You know, if someone paid the money they were meant to, they would be home with their daughter and their husband. I don't blame her for being angry. The other thing she said, which she didn't say at the press conference, is that she was telling me, just in conversation, because we had lunch after the press conference, that the minute the money was paid, Julia, they couldn't wait to get her out of the door. She literally said, they pushed me out of the door. They didn't even let me pack my bags. They literally pushed her out of the door. So, I mean, it was a direct link. I sort of don't blame her for being angry.
Well, let's have a little listen to what Nazanin actually had to say in that press conference yesterday.
But I was told many, many times that, we're going to get you home. That never happened. So there was a time that I felt like, do you know what? I'm not even going to trust you, because I've been told many, many times that I'm going to be taken home, but that never happened. I mean, how many foreign secretaries does it take for someone to come home? 5? It should have been one of them eventually. So now here we are. What's happened now should have happened 6 years ago.
I mean, you could hear the anger and see the anger in her face. And I have to say, I'd be pretty angry after 6 years away from my life, my freedom, and indeed my child. And she pointed out, her daughter Gabriella is almost 8 years old, and she was 2 when she last saw her. She was taking her 2-year-old to visit her parents, to meet her grandparents, of course. In terms of what was done to get her out, that payment was made. But also, did it rely also on a lot on Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who taking a personal interest and making this a key issue for her role in her job while Foreign Secretary?
Yes, I think it did. And I've paid tribute to Liz Truss many times. We may be on different sides of the house, but I genuinely think she did prioritise the case. I think there's lots of things as well. I think the fact that Liz Truss said that the regime and personnel had changed in Iran, which made it easier to negotiate, is probably one of the things that lined up for her. And I also think that it might have been, I don't know how much you know about this deal that was made last year, which then fell through, and they managed to negotiate another deal. There was also something about Nazanin being linked up to the Iranian nuclear deal, which fell through when Trump pulled out. At that point, Richard Ratcliffe sent a letter from his lawyers, a very aggressive, angry letter. And Richard is not an angry man, but it was a very aggressive letter from the lawyers saying, well, Nazanin's fate had been tied up with this nuclear deal. Now that's fallen through. What are you guys going to do about it? So there was a number of factors that contributed to Liz Truss managing to make the deal happen. But I still give her credit, because at the end of the day, whether she was lucky or not, she was the one who made it happen. And I know that it was also a very stressful time for her. I was in touch with Liz Truss quite a lot, and it was touch and go for a bit, and she wasn't quite sure if it would happen. I don't know if you've seen, Julia, on Twitter, that Jeremy Hunt has come out
former Foreign Secretary, of course.
Yes, he has come out defending Nazanin, saying that those criticising Nazanin have got it so wrong that she doesn't owe us gratitude. We owe her an explanation. And I don't know if you heard yesterday, I said we really need an inquiry and a review into this.
And the Foreign Affairs Select Committee are going to look into what happened. At the end of the day, it was, of course, the Iranian government that chose to play hostage politics with a British Iranian national like her, and not just with her, Anousheh Ashouri, who came home with her on the same plane last week. But of course, we still know that Morad Tabaz, who has been detained for 4 years in the country, is still in Iran, and his family were alongside Richard Ratcliffe and Nazanin yesterday, because of course her father, they were told, he'd gone to stay with his family in Iran. That is not the case, and they're very concerned that he is still being held by Iran.
That's right. So Morad Tabaz's case, I know a bit about it because, interestingly, he actually lived in Hampstead in my constituency when he was in London in 2017. He lived there. He then went to America, and when he was detained, he was living in America, which is why I haven't said he's my constituent so far, but he did actually live in Hampstead, and his family members still live there who contacted me. What they're worried about is when Anousheh Ashouri and Nazanin came home, he's the third British citizen who was also born, by the way, in the UK. I've seen his birth certificate. It's Hammersmith Hospital, it says. They said he was on furlough. Now, this is what Roxanne, his daughter, was worried about yesterday. The government said he was on furlough, I think, to kind of, calm everyone down. The minute Nazanin and Anousheh Ashouri left, he was taken back to prison. Right. So it looked like they had just put him temporarily on furlough to make it look like he was free. But then the minute they left, he was straight back to prison. And he's on hunger strike now, actually. Yeah. So his daughter's very, very worried when I spoke to her yesterday. And that's why for the first time she's speaking out publicly. I don't think she was comfortable speaking out, and she didn't look at ease in front of the cameras at all. But she felt she had to do it to save her father.
Yeah, indeed. Can I also ask you about something which is a far more trivial, and I completely hold my hands up to that, although, of course, breaking the law, if you're making the law, is not trivial to an awful lot of us who live under lockdowns for the last 2 years. Boris Johnson has returned his questionnaire to the Partygate police investigators. It's not yet been interviewed by officers, but we now know that, according to the Met, that more than 100 questionnaires have been sent out to those thought to have broken the rules at lockdown breaching events in Downing Street over the lockdown period. Do you think it's reasonable, you're a London MP, for the Met to be dragging their feet over this? Do you think there's something going on, given that the Met chief, Siddiq, had actually originally said, there wasn't going to be an investigation at all? I mean, this could have been cut and dried by now, surely?
I'll tell you what, Julia, having lived through lockdown and watched my constituents miss funerals, miss birthdays, miss anniversaries, miss like the last moments with their parents or grandparents, even, as you say, frivolous things like my daughter missing 2 of her birthdays when she's very young. Everyone made very big personal sacrifices during that time. I cancelled Christmas with my in-laws, who were devastated because they don't see us very much and don't live in London. All of us made personal sacrifices. The man at the top was Boris Johnson. He's a legislator. He makes the rules for this country. If he's broken the law, he's got to answer, because we can't carry on like this, where there's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of the public. It just means that the public lose faith in politicians, but also they lose faith in the rules. So next time something like this happens, people are going to think, okay, well, the Prime Minister didn't listen. Why should I listen? And the reason we were all trying to stay safe is to keep the country safe. It was a collective effort. And I feel not just really angry about the whole thing, but I feel really worried about how people perceive legislatures at the top, and whether this will mean that people stop following rules next time round.
Well, I hope people won't follow the rules next time round. I've always endorsed people following the law, but I thought it was a terrible law. But if you're going to bring in terrible laws, at least you should obey them yourselves, as what I've always said about Boris Johnson. But Tulip, Siddiq, really appreciate you joining us, Shadow Treasury Minister and Labour MP.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.